The terminal froze in collective disbelief as a sharp cry pierced the sterile airport air. Victoria Hale, a woman known for commanding boardrooms and intimidating rivals, now crouched helplessly on the floor, her designer white suit wrinkled and streaked with dirt. A rough handprint blossomed on her shoulder, the bruise swelling in real time under fluorescent lights. Dozens of strangers stood in a wide circle, smartphones raised high, recording the sight of a titan begging for mercy. The video would spread within hours, labeled with cruel captions mocking her fall. She tried to pull herself together, but her trembling body betrayed her. She whispered a plea, fragile and unrecognizable. The same crowd that once applauded her power now captured her humiliation in pixels. The woman who once decided futures with a signature now fought only to keep her dignity intact, surrounded by silent witnesses who did nothing. Amid the crowd, one man refused to remain passive. Daniel Brooks, broad-shouldered in a wrinkled shirt, stood with quiet authority, his weathered hand resting gently on his daughter Emily's shoulder. Unlike the others, his phone stayed in his pocket. He stepped forward, lowering his suitcase, as Victor Kane raised his fist again, ready to strike. The air shifted as Daniel's presence cut through the chaos, not with shouting, not with spectacle, but with controlled stillness. Years of military discipline radiated through his stance. He locked eyes with Kane, the kind of gaze that told of battles fought and lives carried in silence. Emily's small hand squeezed his, her crayons clattering to the floor. To Kane, Daniel was a maintenance worker, a nobody. But in that moment, he was a wall no hand could pass. Victoria, still trembling, looked up at the stranger who had decided her life would not end in humiliation.
By nightfall, the footage had gone viral. CEO begs like a child flashed across news tickers, framed by looping video of Victoria cowering beneath a raised hand. Social media turned merciless, dissecting her fear, mocking her tears, contrasting her downfall with glossy magazine covers from months earlier. Online commentators framed her as weak, a fraud, or worse, a privileged woman receiving long overdue karma. Corporate rivals circulated the footage quietly, watching her value plummet. Once a symbol of ruthless success, she had become a digital punchline. The humiliation was not confined to the airport. It traveled through every device, replayed by strangers across the globe. The woman who once curated her image down to every angle now had no control. The spectacle of her collapse had stripped her not only of power, but of identity. Overnight, Victoria Hale transformed from an untouchable executive into a global symbol of disgrace. Victoria sat stiffly on a faded couch, a knitted blanket pulled tightly around her shoulders. Daniel's modest apartment near the airport smelled faintly of coffee and old wood polish, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury she was accustomed to. Emily's colorful drawings decorated the walls, stick figures holding hands under smiling suns, and a family portrait with an empty space left blank. For the first time in years, silence filled the room. No assistants, no constant buzzing of her phone, no curated soundtrack of productivity. The CEO who once ruled skyscraper towers now occupied a living room barely the size of her former office bathroom. Yet here, trembling from adrenaline and shame, she felt safer than in her penthouse. Her white suit, now wrinkled and stained, no longer symbolized power. Instead, it hung on her body like a shroud of defeat. She inhaled slowly, as though relearning how to breathe.
Daniel knelt beside her with a first aid kit, his movements methodical, precise, yet careful. He pressed a cold pack against her bruised shoulder, his fingers steady, unflinching. The strength in his hands carried no arrogance, only practiced assurance. He had treated wounds far worse in deserts and aboard ships, though he did not say this. His silence was its own kind of language. Victoria winced, not from the pressure, but from the foreign intimacy of being tended to without transaction. She tried to meet his gaze, but his focus remained on the injury, not her reputation. Emily peeked from the hallway, curious yet respectful, sensing the heaviness in the room.
The CEO, once surrounded by bodyguards and staff, now relied on a stranger's gentleness in a forgotten apartment. Her shoulder throbbed, but beneath the pain she felt something more dangerous stirring, the first crack in her armored isolation. From the corner of the room, a small voice broke the silence. Emily clutched her crayon box to her chest, eyes wide as she studied the stranger trembling on their couch. Without hesitation, she approached and laid the box gently on Victoria's lap. The crayons were worn, paper wrappers peeled, colors dulled from constant use, yet to the girl, they were treasures. "I made a picture," she announced proudly, pointing to a drawing already spread across the table. Two figures, her father and herself, stood beneath a rainbow. Beside them was an empty space, outlined faintly. "That's for someone special," she explained. Victoria felt something rupture inside, not from the bruise, but from a child's innocent invitation into belonging. In her world, relationships were contracts, exchanges, leverage. Here, a little girl offered unconditional inclusion with nothing more than wax crayons and open sincerity. It was disarming, almost unbearable in its purity.
Only hours before the airport collapse, Victoria had been seated in a mahogany boardroom high above the city. The air reeked of ambition and expensive cologne. Marcus Hale, her stepbrother, leaned forward with predatory calm, sliding papers across the table. "Without this merger, you're nothing," he whispered. The words were disguised as strategy, but delivered like a threat. Around them, silent executives shifted in expensive suits, unwilling to challenge Marcus's grip on the family empire. Victoria signed her name with steady hands, but her chest burned with quiet rage. Each stroke of ink tightened the chains binding her future. She wasn't a leader in that room. She was a pawn, a bargaining chip, a woman traded like stock. She left the skyscraper that evening hollow, the city glittering below her like a cruel reminder. Hours later, in the airport terminal, those invisible chains would manifest as bruises across her shoulder. By morning, the quiet sanctuary of Daniel's apartment was breached. Outside, the building's cracked sidewalks filled with cameras, boom mics, and chattering reporters. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, stunned to find a fleet of vans parked on their neglected street. Photographers shouted her name, flashbulbs exploding as Victoria emerged briefly in borrowed clothes, Daniel's oversized shirt hanging awkwardly on her frame. The image was instantly broadcast, a disgraced CEO reduced to anonymity, stripped of polish. Commentators laughed about her fall from marble to mildew. She ducked her head, face partially hidden, yet the humiliation was complete. In her world, people paid fortunes to manage appearances. Here, she had no armor. The cameras didn't see Daniel's steady presence at her side or Emily tugging her hand. They saw only spectacle, proof that power could be gutted and paraded on concrete streets, proof that once gilded lives could be dragged into public squalor.
The kitchen was small, the stovetop scratched and humming unevenly, but for Emily it was a kingdom. She coached Victoria with the authority of a child certain of her expertise. "Wait for the bubbles," she instructed, tiny finger pointing to the pan. Victoria tried, but impatience won, and the pancake tore mid-flip, collapsing into a charred heap. Emily burst into laughter, covering her mouth while Daniel shook his head. The CEO, who once commanded armies of staff to execute flawless dinners, had been reduced to fumbling with batter. Her hands, once trained to sign billion-dollar contracts, were clumsy with a spatula. Yet as she tasted the burnt pancake, something unexpected happened. The edges were bitter, the texture uneven, but the laughter around the table gave it flavor she'd never known. For the first time in years, Victoria chewed slowly, savoring not the food, but the unpolished honesty it represented. That night, memory returned like a cold draft. She pictured her penthouse, glass walls overlooking the city, marble floors polished to sterile perfection. Each room was a shrine to wealth, yet devoid of warmth. She remembered arriving late after endless board meetings, greeted not by family but by silence. Meals appeared on schedule, prepared by unseen staff. Clothes arrived pressed and delivered, untouched by her own hands. The place reeked of success, but never of home. Standing now in Daniel's cramped kitchen, dishes stacked unevenly in the sink, children's drawings taped crookedly to the refrigerator, she felt an unfamiliar ache. This cluttered space contained something her skyscraper never had: traces of life, proof of love. For years she had mistaken control for comfort, status for security. Now, surrounded by chipped plates and the smell of burnt batter, she realized how profoundly empty her perfection had always been.
Rain streaked across the balcony glass, the city beyond blurred into hazy lights. Victoria sat with Daniel in silence, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil inside her. The lavender-scented blanket clung to her shoulders, grounding her in this foreign world. Finally, words broke through the stillness. She admitted she had never made a choice for herself. Every step of her life had been scripted. Family expectations, corporate demands, carefully arranged alliances. Her entire existence had been performance. Here, in a modest apartment, she tasted the terrifying edge of freedom. Daniel listened without judgment, his presence steady as a lighthouse. He didn't offer solutions or strategies. He simply allowed the truth to exist, raw and trembling. Victoria realized she wasn't just fleeing from humiliation at the airport. She was fleeing a life that had never truly belonged to her. That night, vulnerability felt heavier than any boardroom battle. The memory returned in vivid fragments: the airport terminal, Victor Kane's hand crushing her shoulder, the smell of disinfectant, the sharp echo of her own scream. Her body had folded under the weight of domination, knees colliding with the hard tile. Phones had hovered above her like vultures, recording her surrender frame by frame. No one intervened. No one offered a hand. Her power, once untouchable, meant nothing in that moment. She was not Victoria Hale, CEO. She was prey cornered under fluorescent lights. The humiliation had cut deeper than pain. It stripped her of the illusion that status could shield her. She had built her empire on the belief that fear equaled control. Yet here she was, cowering, helpless, mocked by strangers. That moment replayed endlessly in her mind, a bruise imprinted on memory more permanent than the mark swelling across her skin.
In another life, Victoria's closet resembled a showroom. Rows of tailored suits, silk blouses, and heels arranged like weapons of war. Each outfit projected authority, armor against vulnerability. Yet standing in that cavernous space after her downfall, she saw only emptiness. The closet was full, but her life was barren. Not one garment could disguise the hollowness gnawing inside her. She touched a dress worth thousands, fabric soft beneath her fingertips, and realized it had never brought comfort. Status had wrapped her body, but never her soul. Now, in Daniel's apartment, her only clothing option was his oversized shirt, wrinkled, mismatched, smelling faintly of detergent and sweat. Strangely, it shielded her better than any designer piece ever had. In relinquishing luxury, she discovered authenticity. The empty closet became a metaphor for everything she'd built, appearances that looked rich but concealed an abyss of loneliness. The coffee table was covered in crayons and papers, a child's chaotic art gallery. Emily proudly pointed to her masterpiece, 3 figures beneath a wide rainbow. One was tall with brown hair, labeled Daddy. The second was small with pigtails, clearly herself. Beside them stood an outline, uncolored, unnamed, waiting. "That's for someone special," Emily explained matter-of-factly, as though destiny was penciled into wax. Victoria stared at the empty space, heart thudding. It was a child's drawing, crude and simple, yet it pierced deeper than any contract or speech ever had. In the emptiness, she saw her own reflection, a place she had never been offered before, a role not defined by wealth or power, but by belonging. The rainbow shimmered across cheap paper, promising something purer than money. The chance to be chosen. Tears stung her eyes as she realized the outline was meant for her.
Engines rumbled like predators outside Daniel's building. From the window, Victoria spotted black SUVs idling at the curb, their tinted windows reflecting only menace. Men in tailored suits stepped out, umbrellas snapping open against the drizzle. Marcus Hale emerged at the center, flanked by lawyers carrying folders thick with papers, their presence heavier than any weapon. The stairwell groaned under expensive shoes as they ascended, bringing with them the cold air of boardrooms and legal traps. Inside, Emily was ushered to her bedroom, sensing danger in her father's tense voice. Victoria's stomach knotted. She knew this storm was inevitable. The men weren't here to persuade, they were here to reclaim, to strip her of choice, to remind her she was still chained to an empire. The knock at the door echoed like a gavel. Her past had arrived, demanding submission once more. As the confrontation brewed outside, Victoria wrapped herself tighter in the knitted blanket Emily had offered earlier. It smelled faintly of lavender, hand-woven years ago by a woman she would never meet, Daniel's late wife. Each stitch carried invisible fingerprints of love, care, and loss. The yarn was frayed in places, colors faded by time, yet the blanket radiated something no luxury textile ever had: sincerity. In her penthouse, she had Egyptian cotton sheets and imported throws, but none had ever given comfort. This humble piece of fabric, pressed against her chest, was priceless because it held history. For a woman who had always been dressed in newness, the weight of something old and cherished was disarming. Humiliation had stripped her bare, but here was proof that even broken lives could be patched together, warmed by threads of love that endured beyond grief.
The apartment door creaked open to reveal Marcus Hale, eyes sharp with disdain, flanked by lawyers holding contracts like blades. He scanned the room with a sneer, gaze pausing on Daniel before dismissing him as a nobody. This? His expression seemed to ask. His sister, once a titan, now cowered in a maintenance worker's living room. Marcus's voice was honeyed venom, mocking her surroundings, pointing to cracked wallpaper and mismatched furniture. Every word was a dagger aimed at humiliation. Yet Victoria, trembling, stood beside Daniel. Her voice faltered, but did not break. The presence of these men dragged her back to the life she had fled, clinical, transactional, suffocating. Their words reduced her to assets and obligations. Marcus didn't see her bruises, he saw only betrayal of legacy. What he failed to see was her resolve hardening in the shadow of Daniel's steady silence beside her. The lawyers pressed contracts across the table, insisting on compliance. Marcus leaned close, whispering about duty, legacy, and the billion-dollar empire waiting for her return. Victoria's trembling hands reached into her purse and withdrew not papers, but symbols. Her CEO access card, a diamond ring glinting under the flickering bulb, and the sleek key fob to her luxury car. She placed them deliberately on the table. The gesture was louder than any speech. The empire that had defined her existence was reduced to 3 meaningless trinkets. For years, those objects had shackled her identity. Now they became offerings of defiance. Gasps echoed among the lawyers as Marcus's mask cracked, rage bleeding through his polished composure. Victoria, stripped of possessions, stood taller than she had in boardrooms. She was no longer resigning from a company, she was resigning from a life that had never been her own.
Within hours, new footage circulated. Grainy clips of Victoria in Daniel's cramped kitchen, fumbling with pancakes under Emily's instruction. Former colleagues watched gleefully, sending the video through private group chats. "From boardroom to babysitter," one headline crowed. Another sneered, "CEO trades mergers for marigolds." The mockery was relentless, painting her attempts at normalcy as comedy. Strangers dissected her every move, mocking her oversized shirt, her awkward laugh, her burnt breakfast. For a woman once defined by immaculate image control, the exposure was brutal. Yet, as she watched herself on the screen, a strange realization dawned. The footage showed something unpolished, imperfect, and real. For once, she wasn't hiding behind rehearsed smiles or power suits. While the world mocked, Emily's laughter echoed in her ears. In the space between humiliation and liberation, Victoria found the faintest spark of authenticity burning brighter than public ridicule. The women's shelter smelled of coffee, disinfectant, and quiet resilience. Victoria sat across from a trembling mother, clutching a child, their belongings stuffed into a torn plastic bag. For the first time, she wasn't commanding a boardroom, she was listening. The woman's story spilled out, nights of violence, years of silence, a desperate escape. Victoria's pen scratched across intake forms, but it was her eyes that mattered. Steady, empathetic, unjudging. She realized she wasn't qualified by degrees or training. She was qualified by survival. The humiliation she had endured, the helplessness of being struck and mocked, gave her a raw connection these women recognized instantly. She had been powerful once, and powerless now. That bridge allowed her to understand what status blinds others to. Leaving the shelter that evening, exhausted and shaken, she realized she had stumbled into the first work that gave her life meaning.
On Daniel's narrow balcony, soil clung to Victoria's manicured nails, dark crescents cutting against polished perfection. Emily directed with childlike authority, explaining how flowers needed conversation as much as water. Victoria listened, kneeling in the dirt, her white blouse streaked with smudges. The act was absurd by her former standards. She had once signed multi-million-dollar contracts without ever touching the earth. Yet, as she pressed marigold roots gently into the soil, something softened inside her. The balcony, hemmed in by rusted rails, bloomed with possibility. For the first time, she wasn't shaping an empire, but nurturing fragile life. Emily's giggles mixed with the rustle of leaves, and Victoria felt a strange release. Each seed she planted was a rebellion against the sterile skyscrapers she once ruled. In dirt-stained hands, she discovered grounding. What had been beneath her yesterday now became the beginning of something new. One evening, Victoria found Daniel alone in the corner of the balcony, a folded flag resting in his lap. The weight of memory seemed to drag his posture forward, shoulders once broad, now bowed. He touched the embroidered stars with calloused fingers, silent, distant. Victoria didn't intrude, but recognized grief's language. Later, she saw a photo tucked behind Emily's drawings, Daniel in uniform, standing beside a smiling woman with kind eyes, Sarah. The absence was palpable, a ghost woven into every blanket, every drawing, every hesitant laugh Daniel gave. He had carried wounds without broadcasting them, carried loss without demanding pity. His silence was heavier than speeches. It explained the steadiness in crisis, the calm in confrontation. For the first time, Victoria understood. He wasn't saving her to be heroic. He was saving her because he knew what it meant to lose someone when nobody stepped in.
Far above the city, Marcus Hale reclined in the family skyscraper, lawyers circling like vultures. Contracts sprawled across polished wood, each clause aimed at reeling Victoria back. They spoke of fiduciary duty, shareholder betrayal, breaches of family trust. To them, she wasn't a sister or even a woman. She was a liability, a chess piece removed from the board. Marcus smirked at leaked videos of her cooking in a maintenance worker's kitchen, feeding the narrative of her downfall. He had spent his life climbing into power's throne, and Victoria's rebellion threatened to topple his careful architecture. Every word in that room reduced her existence to percentages and assets, stripping away her humanity with legal precision. The boardroom smelled of leather and fear, but its sharp edges were losing their grip. Far from the skyscraper, she was discovering worth in places no contract could measure. The night air was heavy with the scent of wet soil and city smoke. As Victoria leaned on the balcony rail, Daniel stood beside her, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the skyline. Words slipped from her lips before she could stop them. "They'll never let me go." Daniel turned slowly, his voice low and unyielding. "People aren't possessions." The phrase struck her like thunder. No one had ever seen her as more than an asset. Family, colleagues, even lovers had weighed her worth in profit and prestige. Here was a man who stripped all of that away, reducing her existence to something elemental, a person needing protection, not a CEO needing control. The truth unsettled her, trembling at its simplicity. In the balcony shadows, with soil still clinging to her nails, she realized freedom wasn't about escape. It was about finally being seen.
One afternoon, a knock rattled Daniel's door. A man in uniform entered, Colonel Martinez, carrying a briefcase filled with yellowed letters and faded photographs. He greeted Daniel warmly, addressing him with the weight of old campaigns. Victoria watched, curious, as the colonel laid out documents. Flight 447, hydraulic failure, March 2019. Daniel's name appeared across survivor testimonies, families thanking him for keeping 23 passengers alive during an impossible emergency landing. Victoria's breath caught. Daniel had never mentioned it, never leaned on heroism for validation. To him, it was simply duty, not glory. Emily's eyes lit up, declaring her father a real hero, but Victoria saw deeper. His silence, his humility, his refusal to use the past as currency, this was what made him formidable. The world had overlooked him, but she understood now. Daniel wasn't ordinary. He was extraordinary precisely because he never demanded anyone to notice. Dinner that night was simple. Spaghetti twirled awkwardly on mismatched forks. Emily leaned forward, her voice certain, declaring they were no longer just a family, but a complete one. She held up her drawing, freshly finished. 3 figures standing together in a garden, each holding a flower. "This is us," she explained, assigning each bloom a meaning. Daniel's was strong, Emily's was growing, and Victoria's was blooming. The words landed with a weight no corporate speech had ever carried. For Victoria, it wasn't recognition from shareholders or applause from executives. It was a child deciding she belonged, not by contract, but by heart. Around that cluttered table, the world's ridicule and Marcus's threats dissolved. A crayon drawing on cheap paper had accomplished what wealth never could. In Emily's declaration, Victoria found the one title she had never dared to imagine: family. The apartment door slammed open once more. Marcus stormed in, fury etched into his features, lawyers trailing like shadows. He spat accusations, declaring she was throwing away a billion-dollar legacy for nothing. Papers flew across the table, legal threats crafted to bind her again. Victoria stood, her hands no longer trembling. Her voice cut through the chaos with steady resolve. "Yes, for love." Marcus scoffed, disgust curling his lips. Love was weakness in his world, a liability no contract could quantify. Yet she stood taller in her refusal than she ever had on a boardroom stage. Daniel remained beside her, silent but solid, a presence that anchored her against Marcus's storm. Emily peeked from her doorway, watching her father's hand steady Victoria's. The confrontation ended not with signatures or settlements, but with a woman finally defining her worth outside the family empire's suffocating chains. The last relic of her old life clung to her wrist, a luxury watch, gold catching the dim apartment light. For years, it had been a silent reminder of deadlines, status, and chains disguised as achievement. Victoria unclasped it slowly, the weight leaving her arm with finality. She placed it on the table beside her discarded card, ring, and car keys. Marcus's eyes narrowed as the gesture gutted his argument. What he worshipped, she abandoned. Her humiliation had once been broadcast to the world, but here she reversed it. By choosing nothing, she gained everything. Marcus left in silence, fury unresolved, his power impotent against her defiance. The door closed, leaving only the sound of her unsteady breath. She had stripped herself bare of symbols, yet for the first time in decades, she didn't feel exposed. She felt free. Freer than any billionaire had ever been.
Weeks later, Victoria's days began not in glass towers, but in the shelter's worn lobby. She sat with women whose eyes mirrored her own past, fear, exhaustion, a longing to be seen. Her business acumen, once sharpened for hostile takeovers, now helped survivors navigate contracts, housing, and financial traps. She wasn't admired for power, she was trusted for presence. Each success was small, a signed lease, a secured job, but to her, it felt richer than billion-dollar mergers. At night, she returned not to penthouse silence, but to laughter echoing in Daniel's apartment, Emily's crayons scattered like confetti across the floor. Her paychecks were modest, her wardrobe pared down, her meals imperfect. Yet in the imperfection, she discovered wealth. For the first time, her life was no longer a performance, but a mission. Not to dominate, but to heal. Not to be admired, but to belong. Morning sunlight filtered through thin curtains, illuminating the modest kitchen. Daniel brewed coffee, Emily hummed while coloring, and Victoria watered flowers blooming on the balcony. The lavender blanket lay folded on a chair, no longer a relic of grief, but part of daily life. The space, once small and shabby, now glowed with warmth richer than marble halls. Outside, the world still mocked, headlines still recycled her collapse. But here, humiliation had been transformed into foundation. Victoria wasn't CEO Hale anymore. She was simply Victoria, chosen not for power, but for presence. She looked at Daniel, who met her gaze with quiet steadiness, and at Emily, who smiled as though she had known all along this would be their ending. Family wasn't inherited or purchased, it was chosen, every day. And in this sunlit moment, she knew she had finally been chosen back.